This is at the Augusta Civic Center, where as many as 1,000 people are gathered tonight to watch the swearing in. Troy Jackson is taking the stage now to lead the swearing in of Governor Mills. Let's take a listen.
Actual oath. And if our notes are right, Janet Mills' grandchildren will come back on stage and hold the Bible.
Please step forward.
Yes.
About this spot.
Yeah. Governor Mills and Troy Jackson go way back.
They do, and this is, of course, prescribed in the Constitution that the Senate President, Troy Jackson in this case, administers the oath to the governor.
Wow, different grandchildren than those who led us.
Governor.
Well, the Pledge of Allegiance.
Governor, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Janet Trafton Mills,
Do swear
that
I will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state.
I will support the Constitution of this state and the United States, or the United States. I will support the Constitution of the United States and of this state. Yes.
We got to get this right.
All right. I'm with you.
So long as I shall continue a citizen thereof.
So long as I shall continue a citizen thereof.
So help me God.
So help me God.
I state your name.
I, Janet Trafton Mills,
Do swear
that
I will faithfully discharge
to
the best of my abilities
the best of my abilities
the duties incumbent on me as governor of the great state of Maine.
the duties incumbent on me as governor of the great state of Maine,
According to the Constitution
according to the Constitution
and the laws of this state.
and the laws of the state.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And Governor Janet Mills starts her second term officially.
Yep, you don't have to call her governor-elect any longer, Jen.
And we're getting a standing ovation here in the Civic Center. People standing up across several different rows.
I think that's great.
4 years ago, history that Janet Mills elected the first female governor of the state of Maine, now first woman to be re-elected.
That's correct.
As governor of the state of Maine.
That's right.
In a race that was expected to be close, Steve, but really was not in the end.
It was not. She defeated former Republican Governor Paul LePage by more than 13 percentage points, which I don't think anybody saw coming, including Governor Mills. She felt pretty good heading into Election Day, but not that good.
The Secretary of State, Shenna Bellows, will come forward and read the proclamation.
It is my solemn duty, my distinct privilege, one of the great honors of my life, to present this proclamation, the words of the last 200 years, and governors sworn in over the last 200 years, given under my hand this 4th day of January in the year 2023 to the Joint Convention. The votes given on the 8th day of November last in the cities, towns, and plantations of the state of Maine for governor, the returns of which have been made to the office of Secretary of State, having been examined and counted by the legislature, which has declared that a plurality thereof was given to Janet Trafton Mills, that she is duly elected, and that she, having in the presence of the two branches of the legislature in convention assembled, taken and subscribed the oaths required by the Constitution to qualify her to discharge the duties of that office. I therefore declare and make known to all persons who are in the exercise of any public trust in this state, as well as all good citizens thereof, that Janet Trafton Mills is Governor and Commander-in-Chief of the state of Maine. and that due obedience should be rendered to all her acts and commands. As such, God save the great state of Maine.
Secretary of State Jenna Bellows issuing a proclamation declaring Janet Mills governor of the state of Maine. Everybody got a giggle out of the due obedience part of that.
It's my privilege and honor to present the Honorable Governor of the great state of Maine, Janet Trafton Mills.
It's kind of interesting, Jen, to watch Senate President Troy Jackson and Governor Mills interact on the stage because they've had disagreements in the past. Troy Jackson would be the first person to admit that. Very bitter disagreements on policy at times. But I think that that's actually fostered a bit of a friendship. You can kind of see it just the way they interact with one another.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, please be seated. My goodness. Mr. President, Madam Secretary of State, Madam Speaker, Madam Chief Justice. I like the way this is going. It is, and members of the 131st Maine Legislature, members of the Cabinet, Rabbi Ash, Bishop Brown, and distinguished guests, it is a profound honor and a privilege to take the oath prescribed by the Constitution and to assume again the mantle of governor of the great state of Maine. I am deeply humbled and by the trust the people of Maine have placed in me. President John F. Kennedy once said, "If more politicians knew poetry and more poets knew politics, I'm convinced the world would be a little better place in which to live." I agree, and I want to thank especially our own poet laureate, Julia Bousma, and Bethel resident and presidential inaugural poet, Richard Blanco, and Maine's poet-musician, Dave Mallett, for their very inspiring words. Thank you to the Franklin County Fiddlers and the Sockalexis Singers and the Pacintu Choir, Pacintu Multinational Girls Choir, and including my young friends Shai and Natasha, who graced the same stage with their presence 4 years ago. Welcome back. You're more beautiful than ever. I also want to draw your attention to the empty chair in the military section of the audience and to honor and recognize all Maine service members who have lost their lives in service to their country. I would not be standing here today if it were not for my family as well, my brothers Peter, Paul, and David, my sister Dora, niece and nephew, my 5 daughters and 5 wonderful grandchildren, and my husband Stan, gone 8 years now, who rose every morning happily proclaiming, "The best is yet to come." Traversing this state many times over many months, I have learned more about the character of our people and the worth of our communities, what we give and what we take and what we offer to each other. I've toured clinics and hospitals, large and small, schools, warehouses, stores, diners, and boathouses, log yards, libraries, and factories, houses of worship of all faiths. And I can report from the Can-Am at America's First Mile to Maine's first town, the 370-year-old Kittery, from Friar's Brew Pub in Bucksport to Bang's Mussels in Portland, from Robbins Lumber in Searsmont to Louisiana Pacific in Holton, from Geiger Brothers in Lewiston to New Balance, Sappi, and Maine Grains in Somerset County, from the lakes and slopes of western Maine to the University of New England, Athena Health, Jackson and Bigelow Labs, the Ferlin Center in Orono, and the Rue Institute in Portland. Great things are happening in the state of Maine. And I can report as well that across this state, this one Maine, hope is very much alive. Over the last years, you know, there was something that caught our attention, especially during the pandemic. These large, luminous, neon-like signs that began popping up in cities across Maine. Hopeful, they read in colorful, cursive script. These signs became a symbol not just of survival, but of health, renewal, new life. The sign's creator, Charlie Hewitt, said, quote, "To be hopeful is not a gift, it is a challenge. It's a challenge. To be hopeful requires opening your eyes, it requires making a decision, being part of something," unquote. Maine people know and embrace this. Indeed, we experienced it these last few years. And tonight, like Charlie Hewitt's Art Deco signs, a flashback to previous decades, at this time, the James Webb Telescope is taking us back through time and into the bowels of celestial history like some magical mystery tour of the universe, drawing us both inward and outward through space and time and unlocking mysteries of the past and foreshadowings of the future. So I can't help but wonder if our forebears a century ago had a Webb telescope to view the world down through time, what might they think of where we are today? Would they ever have imagined that the log drives would come to an end, that the narrow gauge railway would turn into a quiet footpath, that our granite quarries would be rendered obsolete by the invention of concrete? Could they have foreseen cell phones and flat-screen TVs and computers of any size with words that are written and then disappear on a virtual page as though they had never once become thought? Well, we do know one thing our forebears were thinking about. Exactly 100 years ago, Dora Bradbury Pinkham of Fort Kent, Maine, became the first woman to serve in this legislature. It was big news. Arthur G. Staples of the Lewiston Evening Journal wrote about it. He said, quote, "It may happen that in after years, perhaps 2023, he said, some woman governor of Maine and some legislature largely composed of women may desire to know how the first woman legislator carried herself." And he continued, "So," he said, "in the year 2023, 100 years hence, Dora Pinkham is thus presented to you, and Maine is ready for her sisters." End quote. Well, Arthur Staples, here we are. I hope Dora Pinkham would be pleased to know that today, half of our congressional delegation are women, that a black woman from Portland is our Speaker of the House. And that a woman whose own roots lie deep in Pinkham's beloved county has now taken the oath for the second time to serve as governor of the state. Today, a century after Dora Pinkham took the oath, our rivers no longer carry logs to sawmills. Our food comes in slick packages from around the globe. And we meet with distant friends and coworkers on a screen the size of a writing pad. But what about our descendants, those generations yet to come? What might the telescope of the future reveal to them about who we are now and where we are going? Will it be good? Will they be proud of us? Will the people of the future see how we fought disease, homelessness, crippling opioid use, and a fear of those who are different from us? Will they appreciate that for their sake and ours, we began to rid our farms and waters of the forever chemicals known as PFAS? Will they see how we promoted health and education, celebrated arts and literature, preserved our precious right to vote, and conducted free and fair elections? Will they see how we adapted and evolved during turbulent times, adjusted to technology and innovation, how we explored new sources of energy, electricity, new modes of communication and travel? I hope so. But perhaps they'll ask other questions, probing questions as well, like, what was that daylight savings thing all about? Who the heck was Elon Musk, and what on earth was Twitter? And what were all those tall gray structures that held something called an office? Maybe they'll also ask, what took them so long to shelter the unhoused? Why did it take years for them to build a house when we can 3D print a single home in an hour? Why, they may ask, did they wrap everything in packaging, material they could have reused, and why did they dump waste in the ocean and bury it in the earth? What were all those parking lots and those tarred roads crisscrossing the countryside, they will ask, and the gases emitted from structures and vehicles that clogged the air and warmed the planet and melted the ancient glaciers? Why, they will ask, did the scourge of a drug epidemic rob them of so many precious lives? Why didn't they have safe and loving places to care for all their children? Why did they pay so much every time they went to a doctor or a pharmacist? These questions, my friends, may be asked in the future, but the answers will be shaped by our actions in the coming months and years. Four years ago, I stood before you and promised to work for a healthier, more vibrant, more welcoming state. Who could have known 1,463 days ago that this state, this nation, and countries across the globe would face a deadly pandemic reminiscent of the Spanish flu from 100 years ago? One that would threaten the safety of every community, business, family, and person, one that would challenge us to reinvent how we learn, work, play, travel, and communicate safely, a phenomenon that would test the very core of our character. It was during that time that I heard from thousands of you, emails, cards, letters, notes from people sharing their thoughts and their fears, including ones from children like 10-year-old Savannah, who wrote, quote, "Dear Governor Mills, I hope this COVID doesn't affect our hearts being isolated from one another," end quote. Well, Savannah, we learned that neither a worldwide pandemic nor any other thing will ever isolate our hearts from one another. For we are a caring people. We in Maine are family. And we have found such strength within ourselves we didn't know we had, even as Dave Mallett puts it, with our backs against the wall. And we have once now come through that horrific time better than nearly every other state in the nation. With the good people of this cabinet, with the brilliant leadership of Commissioner Lambrou and CDC Director Nirav Shah, and others. We answered the call. Now, experts nationally say that both our public health response and our economic recovery have been among the best in the country. Four years ago, I committed my new administration to taking us into the future, to welcoming new people to our state and welcoming back those who have left. And so I'm pleased to report, after the decades-long exodus of young people from our state, Maine now boasts the 7th highest in-migration rate in the country. We're welcoming new people every day, and we continue to listen to the people of Maine. You said you wanted a government that paid teachers better, that funded public schools, schools where children would learn on full stomachs, and a government that made the dream of higher education attainable for more people. And so, we fully funded the state's share of public education for the first time in history. We provided universal free meals in the public schools. We provided free community college to recent high school grads. And we enacted one of the most generous student loan forgiveness programs in the country. You said you wanted health insurance for more people, so we expanded MaineCare to more than 100,000 people, as the voters told us to do. And we've reduced the uninsured rate by more than any state in the country. And we listened to small businesses drowning in health insurance costs, and we lowered their premiums for the first time in decades. You asked us to pay attention to what UN scientists have called a red code for humanity, and the violent storms across the nation damaging homes and farms and towns and fisheries and wildlife and everything our country holds dear. So, with renewable energy, weatherization, efficiency, alternative heating sources, and a focus on resiliency, we have put Maine on a path towards carbon neutrality with a plan to protect our precious farms, shorelands, and towns from the ravages of climate change. You asked us to expand broadband, recognizing that it is the communications highway of the future and that high-speed internet is as necessary to everything we do as water is to life. So we created the Maine Connectivity Authority, and we've connected more than 48,000 households to the internet, and I've pledged that by the end of 2024, every person in Maine who wants a good internet connection will have one. You asked us to begin to repair the divisions between the state and tribal nations. And so we enacted the highest water quality standards in the nation for rivers with sustenance fishing. We expanded tribal court prosecution of domestic violence, and we negotiated major new revenue sources for the tribes. You urged us to protect reproductive health care against the threat, now real, that the Supreme Court would overturn Roe v. Wade, and we did so. We passed laws that discouraged protesters from blocking clinics, that required public and private insurance coverage for abortion services, and made those services available to women in rural as well as urban areas of the state. You asked us then to preserve some of the special places of our state. And so, without borrowing, we reinvigorated the Land for Maine's Future program and acquired thousands of acres of working waterfront farmland and wildlife habitat for generations to enjoy in trust 100 years hence. You asked us to fight against federal rulings that threatened our iconic lobster industry, and we did, working with members of Congress, securing a regulatory pause, as well as funding for new research to protect both the right whale and the lobster industry. You asked us to manage our budgets prudently. And so state government has lived within its means, and we have built up the rainy day fund to a record high to shelter us from the impacts of inflation and possible recession. And we've continued to fix our highways and bridges, worn by time and use and Maine's changing seasons, without borrowing. Roads. But our job is far from finished. Today, a workforce shortage undermines our very ability to get things done, from teaching, policing, healthcare, farming, to selling and manufacturing and selling goods. Help wanted signs are everywhere. And so we are expanding workforce training in high schools and community colleges. We're making more child care available for working parents. And we're partnering with towns and businesses to find better housing for workers and shelter for the unhoused. And we're putting people to work. You're asking us to strengthen and diversify our economy, recognizing that we're too dependent on other states and nations and too vulnerable to the volatile winds of worldwide geopolitics. So we are investing in our fisheries, farms, and forest products to produce more at home, seizing on our spirit of independence and self-reliance while seeking new markets abroad. You're asking us to diversify our energy sources and loosen the stranglehold that fossil fuel companies have on the wallets of Maine families and businesses. So we are pursuing renewable sources of energy that will protect both our environment and your family's bottom line instead of big oil's profits. You're asking us to address the crisis in housing. So we issued, first off, we issued the senior affordable housing bonds, first thing. Then we enacted the largest investment in housing in state history. We renewed the historic rehabilitation tax credit, and we have funded more than 1,500 new residential units and adding hundreds more in the years to come. We're working every day with cities and towns and developers to stand up emergency shelters and workforce housing in a way that fits the needs of every town. You're asking us to do our best to stop the ravages of opioid addiction and the waste of human life and human aspirations from drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine. And so we are in earnest providing treatment beds and recovery and prevention measures and distributing naloxone everywhere to save thousands of lives. And we will make sure that every school and every community has an effective prevention program to stop the scourge of addiction before it begins. You're asking us to make sure that every child in Maine is safe, acknowledging that these same drugs that are killing adults are endangering children too. So we reactivated the Children's Cabinet, long dormant. We put more child protection workers on the street, and we're adding resources for foster families in every effort that we can to keep our children safe. But that work is never over. We cannot and shall not rest until we eradicate the scourge of child abuse and neglect, drug overdose, and domestic violence, acts and injuries and deaths that tear at the very fabric of our society. You're asking us as well to recognize that children's emotional health also suffered during the pandemic, and that hospital emergency rooms and jails are not the right places to treat someone in a mental health crisis. So we have opened Maine's first comprehensive crisis receiving center. We're investing in residential care and community-based treatment. We're training up more professionals and expanding mental health crisis services statewide. Ladies and gentlemen, over the next 4 years, it will be our challenge to address these issues head-on, to continue the march of progress we began 4 years ago, and to be prepared for the challenges not yet known to us. And in doing so, we envision a Maine as a place where quality health care is unquestioned, where good education from pre-K through graduate school is available and affordable, where good paying jobs are offered in every corner of the state, where children are safe and secure in their homes, and where anyone can go online from any place in Maine to shop, attend a class, conduct business, sell something, get medical help, or simply send a message to a friend. These are our goals, hopeful but real. That hope is built of the hardiness of a people who endure long winters and muddy springs and hot summers and windy falls, people who endure and survive and thrive above it all. Hope is not an easy thing. It's not mere wishful thinking. It's just not just trying to do what we did yesterday in the same old way. Hope is disruptive. It is, after all, a four-letter word. It challenges and changes the way we do things, and it calls on us to advance and adapt while preserving everything we are as a people and all the values we hold dear. And more than ever before, because of everything we have been through and because of everything we are, hope resides here in Maine. Hope. Hope is manifest in the actions you took this very day, actions inspired perhaps by one of humanity's great spiritual guides who said 2,000 years ago, "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in, naked and you clothed me." For your actions today in housing, heating, and helping those in need, the people of Maine are deeply grateful. You, the Maine legislature, have provided hope. Hope is about finding new and innovative ways to solve problems, using the ingenuity and courage we rediscovered within ourselves these last few years. And I see hope all across the state today. There's hope in the work of University of Maine students devising new uses for wood and ways to harness the power of the raw winds of the Atlantic and methods to build homes with bio-based materials from a giant printer. There is hope in the aspirations of inventors and innovators at the Rue Institute, using artificial intelligence and data analytics to solve complex problems. Hope in cities like Waterville, Biddeford, and Westbrook, who are evolving from their industrial past, reinventing their downtowns and attracting new families and new businesses every day. Hope in the faces of women shopkeepers in Lewiston and Portland, selling fabrics, foods, and spices from other countries. These industrious mothers of soccer champions, daughters of another continent. Hope in the vision of enterprising artists, poets, musicians, architects, writers, and makers of crafts in every corner of this state. Hope in the far reaches of the county and down east, and in the shadows of our western mountains where farmers, foresters, fishermen, hunters, storekeepers, and tourists coexist. And there is hope in the eyes, hope as well, in the eyes of those who have forded raging rivers, thick forests, steep mountains, and rough seas to seek refuge here in our country, refuge and work in our country and in our state. There is hope for the future, just as there was hope that saw us through troubled times in the past. The charge, the responsibility we take up today is to choose action over acquiescence and apathy, to make decisions grounded in experience with an eye to the future, and always to be part of something larger than ourselves. And so on this solemn occasion, let us recommit to working together and acknowledging that health care is a human right and we will fight to preserve it. That education is essential and we will provide it. That climate change is real and we will combat it. And that a decent home is essential and we will build it. And when the people of the future look back on us through their own James Webb telescope, they will see that we worked together during difficult times and good, that we settled our differences with civility, common sense, and compassion. That we took care of one another, that we protected the air, water, and land around us and built a state that survived and thrived long into the future. And perhaps, too, they will see some things I believe will never change. The way the surf of the mighty Atlantic pounds the granite shores of our state. The way Katahdin rises up in all its majesty in the western sky. The way the Basilica in Lewiston inspires the people of the mighty Androscoggin. The way so many institutions of higher learning enrich and grace our towns and cities across the state. And the way Moxie tickles the throat as it goes down. And the way the wild blueberry finds a place in every tasty meal. 100 years from now, people not yet born will turn a telescope back in time and find in the Maine of the 2020s, a place where government did everything it could to save the lives and livelihoods of its people, took nothing for granted, but invested wisely to make Maine a clean, healthy, and welcoming place where success is attainable. And they will remember one sign, one word that guided our path, our actions, and our dreams. Hopeful. It is the highest privilege of my life to serve as your governor during hard times and good, stormy seas and calmer waters as we weather the best and the worst of times together, tackling extraordinary problems through extraordinary times alongside you, the extraordinary people of Maine. It is an honor to lead a people where everything good is possible and where we believe always deep in our hearts the best is yet to come. Thank you.
A poetic inaugural address by Governor Janet Mills, built around themes of history, and hope.
That was Governor Janet Mills officially sworn in for a second term to serve another 4 years in the Blaine House. Those commentators there were made public that you heard throughout the proceedings. Now, in Mills' remarks, she touted her response to the COVID-19 pandemic, expanding Maine care and providing free community college to Maine students. Mills also promised to continue to tackle key issues, everything from inflation and the economy to internet access to all Mainers by 2024, and addressing homelessness, child abuse, and the ongoing opioid crisis. You can